Okay, so I think we are live now. Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by. And today we'll be talking about the Japanese and Korean mobile games market. And I am Tousif, the moderator for this session. And with me, I have Henry Liu from Mumtaz Games. He is a former COO or general manager of Comtours. I have Sarkan Toto with me. He is from CEO of Kantan Games, and I have Laurent Pawlowski with me. He is a former One Store and Samsung Galaxy Store. So I'll let the speakers introduce themselves a little bit and before getting into the actual conversation. Yeah, anyone?
Yeah, Henry, you can go first.
Oh, thank you. I'm Henry Yeh. I did work at Come to Us for a long time, 16 hours a day. So that's sort of a shocking thing at that time. But also, I was the managing director of Gumi, that's Japanese. And like everyone else, I worked for EA as the global OEM head when they used to embed games. So that's a bit like a couple of decades ago. So I've been in gaming for quite a while, and I love the industry. So that's me.
Okay.
Laurent, please.
No, Serkan, you next.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Serkan, and I've been based in Singapore. I'm based in Singapore and Tokyo, and I've been around in in the game business as a primarily as a game industry consultant for about 15 years now, with a specific focus on Japan. But I also do a lot, in the general global gaming market. And Please let me also quickly plug. If you want to follow me, please do so on LinkedIn and X. Thank you.
Okay. So my turn. I've been working in the game industry, I think, for 15 years now. I started in Samsung in 2010. So, it was when the first, let's say, Android-based smartphone was launched because, before there were Windows Mobile that nobody's remembering. With the Galaxy S, and I work for Samsung in business development strategy and operation for 10 years before moving to Unity, because Unity was launching the UDP, Unity Developer Portal, to be able to launch your game with a single, how to say, integration to all the third-party app stores. So, Huawei App Gallery, One Store, Galaxy Store, Xiaomi Mi Gets App, and many other. And I worked 1 year and a half there before moving to one of the partner I was managing, which was One Store, because they wanted to launch their store for the global in the global market, since they were only in Korea. And and I left One Store last month.
Okay. So we have a great panelist here, as you can already see or hear from their huge experiences. So now we are getting into the actual conversation. So I would start with primarily like why the Japanese or Korean games are really intriguing to the global audience. So firstly, I would like to ask, like, how do these Japanese and Korean studios maintain a long-term engagement with their nostalgic IPs? What do you think? Henry, you can start.
Myself, I worked and lived in Korea, so I'm pretty familiar. And I'm one of the, I think I'm the first employee of Come to Us, so I'm still close with them. I've been trying to recruit them to come here. Um, we were very and still very focused on sports games, racing games. Getting those IPs were quite difficult at the beginning because we had no money, and then we had no name, so that was a catch-22. But like I alluded to earlier, we got lucky. Tetris funded us, as well as the fact that it's called Tetris. Hank Rogers put us on the map. Um, so that really, really helped a lot. And I still see him running around the world in different conferences. But to your point, the goal was to build ourselves into our own IP. And then we try to get US and European IPs, like NFL, FIFA. They were just too expensive. So we just built our own IPs in Korea because we're able to afford it and we're relatively large. of course, we Nexon and Smilegate and etc. sort of superseded us. By end of the day, IP is incredibly important, and because I'm in Saudi now. Everyone's looking for a transmedia. It's there's different names for it, but basically all encompassing IP that can be used for many reasons. Obviously, Lego, Marvel, Disney, those are the best. But it come to us, we were able to become sort of sports focused. Uh, I left like 10 years ago, so I don't really know what's going on, except I talk to the founders often when we meet in different countries. But the ultimate goal is come to us itself became an IP, and inherently that has value. Um, yeah, so that's my view of IP in terms of internal to come to us, and 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 IP is incredibly important around the world. Like I just said, in this part of the world, we're doing transmedia, cartoons, manga production, and Doraemon, or giant robots like Voltron, One Piece. I'm forgetting like 800 other IPs. So they're all in Saudi in physical form as well as digital form. And that's why I'm in Saudi Arabia. There's so many possibilities going on right now.
Yeah. Anyone else? Sarkan, Laurent, would like to add
Yeah,
anything?
if I may chip in really quickly. So I totally agree that IPs are important in gaming, and I think that nowadays they're more important than ever because there's too many games in the market, right? Just
Yep.
too much competition
Yeah.
on the content side, on the supply side. And I would say that I would just add one thing. I would just add that that Japan is probably the strongest in the world when it comes to IP power, because
Yeah.
only here we have franchises like Mario, Pokemon, Zelda, Sonic, Street Fighter, Resident Evil, and
Yep.
Final Fantasy, and all of these things combined with another big entertainment vertical, which is anime and manga, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes these franchises travel from one place to the other place, and things like that. So there's an unbelievable amount of IP power, I would say, in the Japanese market. Not, of course, I understand South Korea and other places also have built up their own legacy over time. But I think in terms of IP power and depth, and kind of like the scope of that in this area, I think Japan is probably unmatched in the world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Sarkan. And actually, if we check because we talk about IP creation and nostalgia, so about the past history of these two countries compared with gaming and their culture. Uh, so before in Japan, so everything started, I believe, in the 80s. When all the manga and anime were already booming and in Japan, and we start discovering that in the West, especially in France. When I was kid, when I was 7 years old, most of the people in the West were raised with like Marvel or like anime like that. But in France, we were the country where they were showing on TV Japanese animation. So we have a full generation of people raised with Japanese animation, and you have to remember that at that time, Atari almost died, and who was rising? It was Nintendo and Sega. So like they have this from two vertical. Japan is coming with two vertical: the video game and the Japanese anime and manga on one side, and it's coming back from the 80s. And if you compare with Korea, Korea is open, until 1998, if I remember, and you will correct me if I'm wrong. But the Japanese stuff were forbidden in Korea. So like while we
Yeah.
were playing like on this kind of console, it was not pretty open in Korea. And so I worked in Samsung. So my boss in Samsung was telling me that, oh, actually we were distributing Sega Mega Drive and Nintendo in Korea, but Nintendo was distributed by Hyundai under a different name, and Samsung was distributing, Sega console with the name Game Boy. This is a true story. And yeah, so the history is little bit different. So Japan has much more experience, and Korea has it's more recent where they are building the IP, and the IP are not based on that; they are based on the PC world. So like everything started with, I believe, Lineage and that kind of game. And so they have shifted from the IP that they have built on the PC, like Lineage and the Card Rider, Maple Story, that kind of things, directly to mobile without going through console, where Japan is pretty much a console market. So that's the history of the IP, why they are so different between these two countries, even though they look so similar from the West.
Wow, that's a great insight, Laurent, Henry, and Sarkan. So, since you mentioned Henry, you mentioned about like transmedia, it's becoming really popular these days. So we have been also seeing a lot of collabs being happening. I mean, it's more than ever. I mean, we are not really getting used to seeing so much collabs in the games, or maybe games turning into TV shows and all those things. So I would like to get your perspective on that, because you mentioned the word transmedia and it's very like hot topic right now. So what do you think about that part?
Um, by the way, they call it transmedia here, so different regions been calling it different things. So the definition is a bit loose. I'm biased because uh, Saudi has money,
Yeah,
and half the population are young, under 35,
yeah,
and they're wealthy and
yeah.
have time and have money. That's why I'm here, and many companies are here. Yeah, I think it's they're ready to boom. Um, they're sending delegates, which is a very formal term, to have all these photo ops, handshake around the world. So that's happening in full force. And of course, once a year, everyone comes in during the esports and then the Olympic, the IOC. They got um, the online Olympic uh, what do you call that license to promote it in the next Olympic. So that's the kind of scale they're working on. Of course, they have Qiddiya, which has
Mm,
Six Flags, and for example, a bit off tangent is they're building a ski resort in this country where it's a desert, right?
yeah.
So they can do. I mean, think. I mean, you're skiing in the desert.
So
So
yeah,
very yes, and then they're gonna do like VR, XR, a bunch of other stuff. Uh, but really, to your point, um, this is still a place that they can do transmedia. Obviously, there's manga production that is also movies, TV shows, and they're doing live events. There's a lot of esports going on here, so I think uh, this is. Um, it's good in the sense that there will be at least one region that will invest in all the other regions. Of course, you could argue every country is proud of their own region. I mean, they think, I mean, they want to make the gaming hub Riyadh, right? And of course, if you're in Tokyo, Japan, Helsinki, you might disagree because every country has its culture, their own um, uniqueness. Uh,
mm,
but end of the day, it's really good that based on what is going on in the world, there's a lot of other competitors. AI even taking away screen time is it's good to have like a dominating force that will make sure gaming is still on track. Uh, and aside from that, we don't talk about politics. We just love to make games, entertain people, and hopefully you can make a lot of money.
yeah. So Sarkan, would you like to add anything about the recent, like why we're seeing so much collabs in the gaming scene in general?
Yeah, so from my perspective as a Japan-based consultant, I think that the rest of the world is just catching up, right? I mean, transmedia and cross-media has been, one of the
Yep.
main drivers in the Japanese gaming industry from day one, basically,
Yeah,
right? I mean, 10, 15 years ago already, mobile games were developed from scratch to
yeah,
be transmedia and cross-media kind of franchises. So, as Henry said, the definitions are a little bit like iffy, right? But some
Okay.
people call it transmedia, some people call it cross media. There's a
Yep.
difference between the two, but this is like an old story in Japan, right? And and I would even say that at least in the gaming space, that Japan was pioneering this kind of like a strategy or tactic or something like that. So I think that in Japan, this is like a very, very old topic that nobody actually talks about anymore.
yeah.
Yeah.
Laurent, would you like to add anything?
Yes, right. So I totally agree on Japan. Especially, I mean, we should search from where does this IP is coming from, which platform. So if we take the example of Japan, like so the earlier was manga, right, and the anime. So the earlier IP like Dragon Ball, Senseiya, that kind of anime, were coming from the anime and the manga world. And since the console game were popular after, but they were really quick to adopt that to like a console game. So we got very early the Senseiya on the Super Famicom on Nintendo, the first Nintendo, and the Dragon Ball same. Like it was the huge success. When they launched the first Dragon Ball Z on the Super Famicom. So the IP were we feel like in Japan it was always together. Like Mario. So they were first on the video game before being now on movies and so on. And if we take the example, and if we check at Korea, it's a little bit different. Like I said before, the first IP were developed on PC, like Maple Story, Lineage, and so on. So they have adopted all these IP to the mobile. So after we got Lineage M, Maple Story M, all this kind of IP. And at that time, the manga were not too famous. The what they call it's in Korea they call that the manhwa, but
Hmm.
actually it's not really the manhwa that is popular. It's more the webtoon. Like people like to read, let's say, the manga on the first that was on PC, but quickly it moved to mobile. And the people love to read that, and it's very well adapted to mobile because you really scroll down and they know how to make it. So and after, so it means that we have also IP now coming from that word. And as you know, K-pop also became very popular. BTS, especially all the like SM Entertainment Group, Blackpink, and so on. But you see, this word of music did not adapt too well to the gaming market. Like maybe we can say that, like for example, I don't know. I think Superstar Series was one of the most popular, maybe with BTS Universe. But all the other games that they have developed on the like BTS IP and the like Blackpink were not too popular. So it depends, how you expand your IP. But of course, in Korea, I mean, in Japan, they are really tight around the IP. If you go to talk to Bandai Namco and you want to say, hey, I want to use Dragon Ball and make my own game, there's no way they will accept that. In Korea, they will be more willing to discuss. Okay, you want to use Lineage. What is your plan? And like it will be more open for negotiation to adopt that. So I would say that Japan has been very tight with the IP, but they have been exploring everything and being very, very successful. They have been very careful, but so when they do it, it's very successful. Korea has been more like willing to try anything quickly, see what's working, what's not working. Sometimes it's a big success, like when that Marble adapt your game, it's usually a big success. But some other were not really a big success. So yeah, so that's the big difference that they have on the IP adaptation to toward the other media.
Okay, so that's pretty insightful to be honest. So, Sarkan, since you mentioned that it's a very old thing in Japan that nobody really talks about, but this has been in their like dictionary for a long time now. So, I would like to understand, like, because Japan and Korea are the what should I say, are the flag bearers of this IP thing. So, do you think how would the global studios would try to replicate the success with the IP? Because they have been the flag bearers of the whole IP thing. So, how do you think? How do the global studios would try to replicate the success with the IP?
Yes, so there have been some attempts, and again, I'm a consultant in the space, right?
Yeah,
So I've been working on with Western studios exactly on this kind of like projects in the past,
yeah,
and I think that it's just like you have to analyze, right? And you have to see what works for you and what doesn't work for you, and adjust these
Mm.
adjust like these kind of like activities. But I think that there's a lot that you can learn in the Japanese market because they do it for on every platform, right? On console, on and on mobile, which are the biggest platforms in Japan. So you cannot take over like things like one to one because things are a little bit different in the Japanese market when compared to Europe or America, for instance. But there's some learnings that you can actually apply to your own projects. And I think the number one learning is think about and I hinted at that a little bit earlier. Think about like your transmedia or cross media approach from day one, right? And not, I think that is really the big difference between Japan and the rest of the world, at least for now. I think that in other places, people build the game first, and then they think about cross media, transmedia, and all of these things later. Again, in
Yeah.
Japan, it's baked in into that kind of like thinking and conceptualizing games and IPs and franchises from day one. And they put a lot of people together in the same room and brainstorm for weeks and for weeks. It takes a long time to come up with a good concept. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right? So sometimes I don't know, the anime production, it's not synchronized with the game production. The anime
Mm.
comes out first, even though the plan was that the game comes out first, and things of that nature sometimes happen. But there's like early attempts of doing that from, I think, as far as I can remember, 2010, 2009, on the mobile game side, where people were still there playing social games, as they were called, on feature phones back then.
Yeah.
Again, it's a very, very old topic in Japan, but I think that the rest of the world is now catching up pretty quickly.
Laurent, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think, like in the West, we have been used to, like for example, they make a really popular movie and after they try to adapt it for video game and it's a disaster.
Mm.
So I think we have been pretty much used to that. So that whenever we see, oh, that's a game coming from a famous IP from this movie, so we classify directly that's a failed game. We know it will be a disaster. So it's true that like in I mean they uh, like the way that they have built the IP, it's a little bit, it's totally different with like I said, Japan and Korea. Korea have built IP based first, on on PC game. There is not like a really famous. I mean, now we have Squid Game, but there is not really like a famous movie, current movie that was adapted to video game after. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And for Japan, it's also pretty much not the case. Like even though they had like a Takeshi Kitano making movie and Miyazaki making wonderful anime. They didn't have like adaptation to not that I remember. It was more like intricate between the video game world and the manga world. So they didn't have the case like in the West where like movie were taken to video game. And the case of when video game were taken to movie, so like a case that I can remember now is Resident Evil. So as a person that discover, like I played the Japanese version, I couldn't understand anything. The first time Resident Evil, I mean Biohazard, by its Japanese name, was released. When I played that, and I was like, really stunned by the graphic. But the adaptation to a movie was a disaster, but somehow it was successful, not by mainly the gamer because people like this kind of movie looks like. So the West, yeah, I think has a lot to learn there, but maybe that's not really applicable to the West case because, like I said, the IP are coming from different area. So maybe it's not like a formula they can replicate. Maybe they should go back to the basic of video games. Why game are successful is because it's a
Yeah.
good game,
Yeah.
uh, so that they can like if they provide an IP to a really good studio, then probably like the studio will make a good game whether they have IP or not. Just IP will kind of boost, like it will make cheaper your user acquisition cost because like it's easier to recognize and so on.
Great insights, Sarkan and Laurent. Henry, would you like to add anything to this?
No, no, Lauren got it right on the nose.
Yeah.
It No matter the IP, if the game's terrible, it won't matter. IP is used, at least through my background, is as a user acquisition cost, and IPs are not free. Our latest game was using Final Fantasy, not cheap, and then Katy Perry and Ariana Grande, all not cheap. But, they were bundled together as a Sony business model. I don't think I could talk in detail how that worked because of NDAs, but
Mm.
um, I yeah, eyepiece is good, but ultimately, it's the gameplay. And if the
Yeah.
game is great, it will be its own IP. I don't know if I'm like dumbing down this so much, like because when the people tell me, older people, I'm like, hey, Fruit Ninja, they all know it, right?
Mm.
The simplest game as well as like
Yeah.
Subway Surfer because the kids play it. So it's not related to a platform or anything, but I would say it's like Google, right? The first time I heard it, I'm like, what a dumb name. Obviously, Google has been a success. So I would say if the game is great, the connotation of players will think, oh, that's whatever you call it. Kleenex is the name, it's Kleenex game. That would be still attract a lot of players. So that's my
Yeah.
view on IP. You build your IP basically.
Yeah. Thanks for the insight. So before we get into the next point of discussion, let's just go through some of the questions because we have been receiving a lot of questions from the audience
Yeah.
side. So I would start. This one is particular for Henry. It's from Shayak Mitro. So question for Henry: how will you differentiate ComToUs and EA, the working culture?
Wow, I'm gonna get fired. I'm gonna get sued. Who is
Yeah.
the person? Because I worked in both okay, EA is an American company. It's a huge
Yeah.
company. I was I was the head of OEM, so we did a lot of finance we're a public company. Every quarter matters that affect your stock price. I would say we were very finance company, not a game company. I understand it's called EA. Uh,
Yeah.
so that was I didn't work for like American Express, IBM. So I've worked in big companies that are not gaming. It's all about the money, right? Because it is what it is. So I would say EA was a good company, not a great company in terms of games. Most people didn't play games. I don't even know if I should even say that because we're so busy that you're making games, so you should play the game so you know what a great game is and what customers want. But yeah, it was pretty tough because we were basically doing Excel sheet all day. So, but I have great memories. It was fun. It's prestigious. Come to us was totally tons of war stories. We are just a tiny little company. We basically everyone spoke Korean and English, but we were launching in Europe. It's called eFig, so nobody could speak French, Spanish, Italian. So that was sort of exciting to figure things out. But I would say the difference is come to us is small, so you feel like a family. Ultimately, when I left, we were already like 400 people, so obviously that's not so family-ish. I knew maybe 40 people very well and their wives.
Yeah.
Um, and and like any big company, it was always about uh, Comptos became IPO. That's why I left. A lot of us left. It became um, more. I love gaming because it's fun, but you still have to do the grunt work to keep the investors happy and to keep the stock price up. So I would say between the two, of course, I'd rather work for Comptos because it was fun. We talk about games all day long. We play
Yeah.
people's games. We play other people, our competitors game till 2 in the morning, and then you try to get up, at 8 to go to the office, and
Yeah.
everyone's tired. So I have really great views of it. And then for EA, very prestigious, very straightforward. You work hard, you do your job, and then you leave. And then I would say I don't even remember any one of us talking about anybody's games. I mean, of course, we're tired. I mean, because it's a different kind of a mentality. But I have great friends and a great memory of it. But at the heart, I'm more like a startup guy. So I'm more like a come to us loyalist, if you could call it that.
Thanks for the insights, Henry. So I'll take this one more question. This is coming from one Amirul Adlan. It's huge name, so I'll just go to the question. A lot of mobile games nowadays clearly spend a lot of budget chasing anime style open world trend. Considering how derivative some of these can look, Are publishers genuinely bankrolling this, believing they can shoot for the number one spot? Who would like to take this one? Sarkan, would you like to take this one?
Yeah, so this is a little bit of a Japan angle because of that anime style.
Yeah.
A part right here. Um, Very very interesting questions. I think that there's not that many anime style open world games actually. There are many. Like I mean, there are some, but not that many because it takes like really big budgets to get these things rolling, right? And I think that NetEase has some, Tencent has some, and of course MiHoYo has some. And I think very very tough to come up with like a new idea inside a game and knock off Genshin Impact or the other MiHoYo games or any of the other like big open world anime style games. So to answer your question, I think that it depends on the publisher. So I worked for a publisher, really really big one of the I think top five or some top 10 in the world or something like that. And these guys were basically saying if our game doesn't make $100 million in revenue very quick on a yearly basis, like in terms of revenue, we're going to close it immediately, right? And this is how a lot of the big publishers think. So if a game that they publish made $70 million, it would not be enough for them, right? And I think very very tough, to launch an anime style open world game nowadays because I think that the hardcore gamers already like invested their time into the other ones that are already in the market, and unless you have a really great game, really with really great idea, tough. Not impossible, of course, but in my eyes, it's getting tougher and tougher.
Yeah, I would like to add on that so I think they especially think about Genshin and the Honkai from MiHoYo
Yeah.
that have kind of the top spot there. But the thing is, so it's like Serkan said, it's very very expensive to build that kind of game. So you need to have deep pocket from the beginning, and like this kind of triple A game, it's several years of building, and if you launch and you fail, you are sure your company will go bankrupt. And you need to make quickly money, not only because you have to cover the cost, but also because the operation cost of this kind of game is terrible, so high. So if you are like how to say, let's say mid successful, it means you are losing a lot of money. So you need your like UA people to try to find quickly a solution, because after you have launched a game, it's really complicated to modify, or like the people on the game design monetization to change quickly and find quickly a solution. Otherwise, like so yeah, it's really hard because it's very risky for the game developer. And that's the kind of game that will totally tank your company. I mean, make you bankrupt if you fail. So you need to be well baked financially. You need to have the strong team, and you need to have a team with people that don't live for like 1, 2, 3 years. It's also really tough in our industry, to hold your employee, like especially like a talented one. So yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough, really risky for them.
Great insights once again, Laurent and Sarkan. Now we'll talk a little bit about the actual core publishing side of the games. So the question is, when an Asian studio, particularly a Japanese studio or maybe a Korean studios, wants to go global, so how do they challenge? How do they face the local cultural identities to international player expectation? I mean, let's talk about the maybe mid-sized to smaller size company, not talking about the MNCs like Nixon or come to us or something. Let's maybe for a smaller sized companies, how do they balance the local identities to international player expectation? Henry, would you like to go first?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we.
yeah. Okay, so when we started the company, I was the only foreigner, but basically, to functionally, we hired different people from different countries that can speak different languages. At that time, I'm that old that people just spoke one or two languages. Now, obviously, it's much easier. So the job requirement was to most of our employees can speak 4 or 5 languages at
Wow.
that time, which was super hard. And of course, they're from well-to-do families. That's why they can speak different languages and well-traveled. Number two, we want them to have lived in the U.S., in Europe, in Japan, especially in Japan, where there's, as Lauren hinted, there's been some historical animosity, if you look back at the real history. So it was really hard to get us featured in Japan for what it's worth. And it is what it is. I mean, we were like ranked 24th. We hired Japanese, they helped us out. Just even culturally having coffee and just the nuance of the communication that's written down. Eventually, we were like top 12, but that took like a couple of years. But the real um, uh, but now we give a counter example. We also built come to us. Sorry, Summoner's War. It was a one build game. We had many games where we had like culturalized or localized, but with Summoner's War, we we thought the gameplay was fairly, I wouldn't say unique. It's a gacha game, so but we wanted it to be an international game. Sorry, I don't know if we call that a game played by international people. So obviously, we cater to that, and then we hire people with different skill sets around the world. And again, most of the money, which is obvious from the number of the speakers here, we targeted Korea first, obviously, Japan, the U.S. because it's one language, big market. China, it took us a bit longer for different reasons. That was because you need a license in China, right? So that was a very difficult hurdle for us anyway. But the short version is, I'm not answering you directly, but we wanted to be an international company and we acted it like that. And then we hired people that are international and many times they work in their own country. Obviously, US, like the big markets, right? And in China, and then we only had like one person in Singapore doing Southeast Asia at that time. So the short version is, we wanted to be an international company because we want to make international money.
I think that's the very right approach. I mean, if you want to be international, you have to think like an international. So that's a very summary from what you said, Henry. So Sarkan and Laurent, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, sure. So I will just talk for Korea here. So in the past, I believe so. I was not in that kind of company, but what I assume is that the Korean game developer, there were very few or maybe almost none international people in the company. So they were always using, like third-party publisher. Like Asiasoft, is very famous in Korea because they used to publish, Nexon and the Gravity and so on.
Yeah.
And so they have been doing like that. And even, Krafton, they use Tencent to release, PUBG for the global market. And I think, so yeah, it comes to the story that said Henry. I think Come to Us changed everything with Summoners Wars because, they were like the first company to say, hey, we can do it, let's do it. And they hired people and they did it. And, I think until now, that's one of the best success Summoners War, like in the
Yeah.
global market. And like the other companies start watching them and they say, hey, if they do it, maybe we can do it at better scale. And that at that time, like all the big Korean game developers start opening US office, like Nixon and so on, to start publishing globally their game. But I would say, yeah, so hiring local people, I think, helped them a lot to learn more on the local market. Because, from Korea, it's really hard to understand exactly what other, how to say, people, especially Western people, like, because Korean, Korean people have very specific taste in terms of gaming, and it's not easily, how to say, like with all the like menu that are very complex and stuff like that. It looks like current player love that. They love to be lost in like so many menu. But basically, our Western player, they don't have time. They're like, oh, it's too complicated. I don't want to like start learning stuff like that. We make like, I mean, the Western game make like very simple gameplay, and they make you at the beginning to like some kind of work through to learn every command very easily. So if you have like 10,000 command, you cannot make like learning like for 10 hours how to play the game. It's not possible, right? So yeah, that's I think how Korea evolved, and yeah, that's basically how they evolved until now.
Yeah, I think in Japan it was different because you basically have two big gaming segments in the Japanese market: the console game market and the mobile game market, right? So, by the
Yeah.
way, mobile gaming is around $10 billion in Japan, and console gaming is around 3 billion, right? So mobile gaming is much much bigger in Japan than console gaming, which is really interesting because if you say gaming in Japan, everybody thinks about Sega, PlayStation, Nintendo, right? But the money is actually in the mobile gaming market. So in the mobile gaming market, I would say internationalization of Japanese companies did not really work for some except for exceptions like Gumi, for instance, which Henry worked for. I think they built up a pretty good, pretty sizable business, and they were already a publicly traded company at that time. So you can actually go back and see how much of the revenue came from outside Japan. I think that Gumi did a good job. There's another company called a smaller company called Clab, which has I
Yeah.
think 40% still today of their revenues coming from outside Japan. And we're just this is just talk just mobile games, right? But overall, especially the big mobile game companies failed in terms of internationalization, like Nixie, Colopo, VNA, Gree, and all of these guys. These are really big, largely
Yeah.
unknown outside Japan, but these are really big companies. They're like large cap companies. And I think that the difference between Japan and Korea here is that Korea is a relatively small country, right? With a relative, I know it's a big economy, right? But when you compare to the Japanese market, I think that Korea is like 4 billion or something like that in terms of overall gaming revenue, and Japan is like 13. It's the number three in the world. So there's a big gap between Korea and Japan. So there's less pressure on a Japanese game entrepreneur, to internationalize, right? To think internationally from day one. The founder of Gree, which is a big, publicly traded mobile game company, he still holds, I think, today like 33% of the company or something like that. You can be What I'm trying to say is you can become a billionaire, right, by just serving the Japanese mobile game market. So why should try to put headache and put trouble into you by trying to get to go international. So the pressure is lower in Japan. So they tried, DNA, Agree, and all of these guys around 15 years ago. They spent over $1 billion, which was a lot of money back in those days, to acquire American companies and internationalize that way. So there were various angles to bring content, export content, things like that, hire local people, again, acquire local companies. But I would say it largely failed, except for a couple of companies where it actually worked quite well. It's different on the console space, right? Because the Capcoms, the Segas, the Nintendos of the world, they internationalized like in the 1980s and 1990s, and so we're talking about a different platform, but also like a totally different point in time. Things were totally different, of course, like in the 1990s and 1980s. So the console game market is much more internationalized in Japan than the mobile gaming market.
And I would like to add also that in terms of how to say the mobile game market, um, Korea was, I think, first to start being successful globally. So we talked about Summoner's Wars, and maybe it's due also to the hardware. Like how Samsung got successful with their smartphone globally. When like the Japanese manufacturer, they quickly were like outperformed by Samsung and Apple, but also by the Chinese manufacturer. And all the game developer also didn't believe too much on the mobile game market, and they were more focused on the console. And we see that suddenly there were a shift in Japan, and I think it's recently, like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, we could say, oh, Korea is more successful on the mobile. But suddenly, Japan, all the IP, Bandai Namco, look like they discovered the formula to make a really nice mobile game. And now we see that the Japanese mobile game maker are much more successful than the current mobile game maker. And we see that recently, and we see many mobile games from Japan now being on the top in the worldwide when there are much fewer nowadays for the current game development.
Yep. I mean, both the Japanese and Koreans have their own, what should I say, own USPs, and they are already working on those to get their games to global. We have plenty to see. Like, for example, we have PUBG from Korea, and from Japan, it's Pokemon. It's it surpasses everyone, for example. But anyway, moving to the next question. So now it's a very interesting thing we're going to discuss, that is the gacha model. So it's very, you can understand, it's now a very hot thing in the mobile games. Like, most of the mobile games are somehow integrating type of gacha, be it a direct gacha or like an indirect gacha. So but with the more usage, we are also seeing more scrutiny and more restrictions in many countries, inside even Japan and Korea. So because this gacha model has been in practice for a while now. So what do you think about gacha in general in the local markets, and what are the alternatives do you see for the monetization practices? Henry, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Well, most of the games I worked on definitely come to us Summoners War as a gotcha game. We try to be fair. We try to not upset players.
Yeah.
And many times it's random. So sometimes a player gets not what he wants consecutively. Also at Gumi, we're gotcha, right? So I've been in a few companies doing that. So um, and of course, it's not casino where it's regulated of a output of a certain return. That's completely a different industry. So um, I mean, it's it is part of the fun and it's part of the anger. So we have had obviously literally players show up in our office, unhappy and they want certain gotcha that wouldn't make sense because if you let one of them do that, then we have to change the whole company. But the system seems to be it has worked well for the developer and the publisher to be selfish, right? However, um, a lot of other players really like the genre, and so I I would quibble about it. I still think it's still a good model, and of course now there's other monetization uh, that you could uh, put into the game, right? Like we could talk about UGC later, but which is not core of Come to Us. We're basically at those companies that were overall, very Japanese and gotcha system, and then we try to give you certain rewards through our DevOps, our service team out of Philippines and Vietnam. So we try to still talk to the players at that time to ameliorate or to sort of uh, see what they're looking for. I mean, we cannot give them items because that would unbalance the game, and then of course they talk to each other and everyone's upset, right? So once you sort of relax the rules, you cannot sort of get it back on track. But overall, it's a good system for a company like Come to Us and Gooby to make money. A lot of other game companies are using this model, so I would say I don't have like deep angst over this model because ultimately it's in your phone. You put money in to have more chances of getting whatever you want. So that's fairly uh, okay. And of course, you do have these companies called Apple, Google that will smash you if you sort of lean towards one or the other direction. And on top of that, there's usually some oversight from the government, right? So I would say they're very heavy-handed, but you can't basically abuse the player. And so, because there's so many layers, like Apple, Google, Steam, and then of course your government. So overall, I'm sort of neutral to the point. It's a good way to make money. Players do like it, and there will always be that 3% of players who are unhappy that they didn't get exactly what they wanted, which is fairly random. So that's my answer. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sarkan, would you like to go next on this?
Yeah, gacha is one of my favorite topics. So I have a blog, where I've been, blogging about this topic for 15 years now, right? So, but to make a long story short, I think that in Japan it's different, right? Because it came out of Japan. So the first mobile game, not PC game, the first mobile game that actually introduced this mechanic and popularized it is Dragon Collection from Konami back in 2010. So that is widely regarded to be the first, gacha game came on mobile for the Japanese market. Feature phone game, and then also later a smartphone game. I think they took it off now. It's now on offline. But the point that I'm trying to make is in Japan, it's absolutely normal that your game has gacha in it. Your high quality game. You don't have to put gacha in every like casual game in every like a quickly made a small game or anything like that. But it's a lot more accepted. It's basically the monetization model in Japan.
Yeah.
And I would say in Japan, it's so popular that my question to Western publishers wanting to get into the Japanese market, my first question, literally my first question is, does your game have gacha in it? Right? Because I think that if your game has gacha in it, it has more chances of monetizing in the Japanese market than not. Right? And in Japan, I would say that the consumer, at the risk of hyperbole, gets a little bit suspicious if your game doesn't have gacha, right? Because they're kind of expecting it. And if your game doesn't have gacha, they say, oh, the game is probably like a casual game or like a simple game where the publisher doesn't even dare to monetize us with via gacha pulls, if that makes any sense,
Yeah.
right? Because all the high quality games, all the IP based games, and things of that nature, or the high value or high production value games coming out of Japanese studios for the Japanese markets, all of them have this monetization technique, right? So there are some games you don't have to have gacha in order to be commercially successful. So Peak, Dream Games out of Turkey, and Playrix, and companies like that, they are in the top 50 grossing in Japan without having aggressive gacha mechanics. But the point that I'm trying to make is, if they found a way to get gacha into their games, which in a meaningful way, I think they would. These companies from outside Japan would even more make more money in Japan that they are doing right now. So it's absolutely critical, actually. I think in Japan, in many ways, to have gacha mechanics inside your game.
Yeah. So yeah, so it's totally right. Gacha is definitely a Japanese word, and but for some reason, I believe the maybe the first game that used gacha, so not on mobile, of course. Japan was the first on mobile. I think was Maple Story from Nexon, and that was back in the PC time that they used this gacha model. So everything started with PC over there, and it's true that like the successful game also use all gacha, and like of course Summoner's Wars is one of the best example in the market. But at the same time, in Korea, it's like, I mean the perception of gacha is a little bit like, is it like a really game? Is it like casino, or like like so quickly, Korea has really strong regulation with politicians that can snap on anything and can put a CEO quickly in jail if he doesn't want to comply. So they have many cases actually where actually the, how to say, scandal linked to the gacha. So I remember in 2021. So my Apple story got this because the user find out that some of the gacha were 0% odds.
Yes.
So as soon, and I don't know how they could find that, but in some way, like you should never face any Korean audience because they always find out stuff, and they found that. So like it yeah, you see, they agree. I don't know who, but yeah, they find out how they made stuff. And actually, last year, the GRIC, like the how to say, the office that regulate the things about video game and the age rating in Korea. They made an audit on all the game that use gacha in Korea, and they found that more than 50% were actually violating the gacha rules in Korea. So like it's all the politician has been on that, like to try to make a tighter regulation, so that the company don't abuse on that, because it's definitely like a huge business model, where you can earn a lot of money thanks to that, especially when users have attachment to the IP. So and then, like current people like to brag about, like, like when they have like something better than the other. So you can see online they would do that, and that would trigger actually the other player to try to get better. They want to be the best, always on what they are doing. So definitely it's working well, but the regulation might change, and especially with political shift in Korea, we especially if we have one side pass against the other, the regulation might be even tighter.
Okay, thanks for the insight. So we are towards the end, like we have like 5 minutes left. So we'll be taking some questions from the audience, and we will wrap it up. So let's take this one from Brandon Timbers. How do player preferences differ from Japan and Korea compared to the rest of the world?
So, like for example, in Korea, if you check the top 100 mobile games, half of them is RPG. That's unique in the world. You don't see that in any other country. I mean, in the West, I mean. So and I think Henry said that they have a huge local market, both of them. Japan, of course, is top. Okay, if we put aside China, but let's not put aside, it's top three by a very big gap. Top three gaming market on mobile, and the current mobile game market also is very big. Is very big. So they can live just on their local market. So they can serve to exactly what the customer wants. Like Lineage for a very long time. It was just for current player, and they say, oh, maybe Japanese will like it, so they try. Maybe Taiwanese people will like it, they try, but it's not launched in the West, right? So the Lineage M. So they can live on their local market. So that's why they have a specific taste. Yeah, I will not talk about. I mean, about Japanese market because you know better. But yeah, that's how the tastes. Some of the tastes in Korea are different.
Anyone would like to add, or we can go to the next question?
Yeah, I think in Japan it's more single player, not really MMORPGs, mobile MMORPGs, but single player RPGs. And the gacha as the monetization is key. And you know, and there's also like IP at play. It's very similar to Korea, where Laurent just said the 50% of the market, the top 100 grossing are RPGs. I think in Japan it's a little bit even more than that even. But of course, you have the one or the other foreign-made puzzle game in there that makes money, but it's usually always RPGs with a strong focus on quests, stories, characters, and things like that. And again, gacha at the heart of monetization.
Yeah, we'll move to the next question. So this one is coming from Gulia Bianchi from Bad Seed. So her question is, how do Japanese and Korean developer approach live operations and community engagement? Henry, would you like to start this one?
Depending how much time, but yeah, we had a really huge DevOps, live ops team because we're always dealing with changes, and that, I don't know if that was very unique back then, but that was a lot of work. That's like half our team, and of course we did outsource eventually to Philippines, um, Vietnam, and part of Bangalore with different results. But basically, that's how you engage player more, which is answering your community. You get to interact with them. Um, they are very passionate, so we don't like it when they show up to the office, obviously. But you get a lot of messages on different social media. Some fans are very angry, some are very passionate, some are good. So, but basically, it's a way to make the game great and continuously. Because I always compare that to people who brag about their movies, but I'm like, hey, how many times did you watch the movie? at the most 10 times for Titanic. Well, when you play games, the games are sort of different every time you play it, and also you play with your friends, right? So the game inherently is different. So I don't have to preach to you for you three because you know how it works. But basically, DevOps and live ops is very, very important, as well as now with AI. The engagement is a bit easier. It can be wholesale. So the tech is pretty good, but basically, you need to engage your loyal fans 24/7.
Yeah, and I would say that's very important. And I worked in Pangyo where all the game developer are located, and I was passing often, by NC office, and it was not rare to not see a truck in front saying message about
Yeah,
like complaining about the game, about this,
yeah,
about that gacha, about that event that they didn't like. So yeah, it's very important that you really take care of your customer when it's in Korea.
yeah. No, it's good, right? Because they're so engaged that they actually show up. It can be a bit scary in Korea because
It's
they're
scary also.
Koreans. I take that back. You hope you can delete that Korean part. They're
So
very passionate.
yeah, about Korea, I came across a news like a year back or two. I think someone, the fans in Krafton's fans were very upset, and they flew a rocket. I think it was for Krafton or Mihoyo, I don't remember. So they put it in a big hot air balloon, and like complaints, all the complaints was there. So that was really surprising for me to know, like, wow, fans are going to this extent to letting their experiences know to the developers. Yeah. Okay. So, Sarkan, would you like to add anything to this live ops and player? This is probably the last one. We will be closing after this one.
Oh yeah, sure. I think that live operations were. I think that the Japanese were the used to be the best in this because they started with all of this like on mobile, right?
Yeah.
I'm just talking specifically on mobile. They started with this whole like social business and putting like social layers into their mobile games and things like that. And just like Henry said, right, a lot of the staff inside these game companies are actually on live operations. And I personally think that live operations are the game, right?
Yeah.
It's not the
Yeah,
first version of the game that is the game, but the live operations that is at the actual game, and so it's taking extremely, extremely serious in the case of Japanese game companies, especially because Japan is a country where service is like very, very important, right?
Yeah.
So and as everybody on this panel knows, these games nowadays, there's services that never end, right? If you talk about like these gacha games and all of these other games that you have on mobile, so live operations, of course, absolutely critical.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to the end of the session. Thanks everyone who has joined today, and particularly
yeah.
the speakers, Sarkan, Henry, and Laurent. So I would like briefly recap what we have discussed. So first we discussed about the IP, like the local IPs, what they are doing, how they are doing, and because originally Japan and Korea have been the main part for the IP development. And then we talked a brief about the local developers going global, particularly for the smaller and mid-sized developers who do not have the budget and resources sometimes, or the other challenges to go global. And then we also talked about the hot topic in the mobile games, that is the gacha one. So this we talked about the main 3 points, but it was a great discussions once again. So with that, I would end the stream. Please feel free to join the other sessions. If you are still listening to this, please feel free to join the other session. We have a whole day of insightful sessions from speakers around the world. So
Mm,
please make sure to be there, and feel free to follow or add the speakers on LinkedIn, or reach out with any other questions you
mm.
might have. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank